Well, hey, Renaissance family, I want to welcome you into our latest video in this Microchurch conversation series we're doing called Neighboring in the Post-Pandemic. And over again, over really about a seven video stretch, we are just trying to emphasize and focus on what does it look like to neighbor. We're coming out of this pandemic, maybe, in some ways still battling it, but we're somewhat back to life as normal. We're interacting with neighbors, we're interacting with friends, we're going on trips and vacations. What does it look like for us to make place matter, to rediscover the importance of our neighborhood and where God has placed us? And to do this, we've been working through Preston Pouteaux's book, The Neighbors Are Real, where he breaks down all these essays on neighboring using the 9 fruits of the Spirit. We've already looked at love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and goodness. And now this video, I want to talk about faithfulness. What does it look like to really have fidelity to our place? What does it look like to have fidelity to our neighborhood? And we've kind of already alluded to this. I've talked over and over again. If you've been watching any of these, probably one of the threads that's been woven into them is I have over and over talked again about the importance of really committing ourselves in a way to where God has us. But again, I want to emphasize some subtleties there and make this its own video and focus on this fruit of the Spirit, God coming, working through us, through the Spirit as we neighbor. And in particular, I think maybe the best way to describe this, Preston Pouteaux, who's one of my favorite authors, she has several really good books. But one of them, she talks about, it's literally titled Living into Community. And she has several different things. She says it's not an exhaustive list. I think there's about 4 of them that have to happen for community to happen. And she says sometimes these happen intentionally and sometimes they happen accidentally. But whether it is intentional or accidental, they have to happen for true community to take place. She's got a number of great things that she breaks down, but one of them is making and keeping promises. In other words, she's kind of talking about fidelity. She's talking about faithfulness in a way, but making and keeping promises. Now, you probably are already thinking this, but making and keeping promises to neighbors is kind of a strange ordeal. Let's be real. We don't sign a contract when we walk into our neighborhood that we're committing ourselves to anybody. We very rarely audibly make promises to those around us, especially our neighbors. And in fact, probably most of our neighbors, as we've kind of kidded around already, probably actually view us as a better neighbor if we kind of leave them alone. But I don't think that's true always. And I really do think that there are some social contracts that take place kind of organically, some ways that we make promises and show our commitment to our neighborhood, even if we don't realize it. In fact, sometimes we do the opposite, some things that we do that make it very clear that we're not committed to the neighborhood. And that's the difference of whether or not life really begins to happen. And so what I want to kind of maybe work on you is have you start thinking through what are some things that I can begin to do that kind of are social, kind of social contracts, so to speak, that can allow me to make it clear to my neighbors that I'm committing myself to them. Some examples, just not necessarily that everybody can do, but some things that I've even noticed recently living in a city like Boston where there's so much turnover. And I think people are afraid to commit unless they see some of these things. But like when we went from renting and we were able to buy a unit in a multi-unit, in a multifamily unit house, when people heard that we had purchased, I saw in several, like I'm in a running group, I saw several people in that group totally change their demeanor and their posture to me. Like, okay, this isn't somebody who's just going to be here for a short time and is leaving. The way my neighbors interact with me, when I was a renter versus now that I own. There's a big difference. Now, not everybody can purchase, but I do think, putting down roots, showing permanency. Permanency is one of those things that shows that we're committing ourselves. There's kind of some fidelity taking place. Another one, when we rented, I will never forget, our landlord lived the unit above us. My wife, Bree, when we first moved in, cleaned up the front porch, kind of the part of the porch that was ours, and hung all these hanging baskets and just made it look beautiful. And I'll never forget him coming down and treated us totally different after that. Like, okay, you're not just renters that are going to be here and treat this like garbage. You really care. You're telling me this home matters. And there began to be a totally different posture. Actually, he became, very close to us, buying our kids Christmas gifts every year and birthday gifts, and just kind of cool. When we lived kind of previously in our previous community, we showed fidelity and kind of our commitment by going around and we gave gifts to all of our neighbors at Christmas time, just thanking them for being good neighbors and saying, hey, you matter to us, and we want you to know that it matters. There can be all kinds, I think, of giving and receiving gifts, of showing hospitality, of just little things that we do that I'm kind of alluding to that I think show like, hey, this place matters. This place is place that we're committing ourselves to, and we want you to know that we do. And so I want you to kind of like, that's my challenge really this week for you, is to think through like, are there some things like even that you don't even realize, some decisions you're making, the way that you live, the rhythms you live, the sorts of language that you use, the things that you do that make it very clear to your neighbors that they don't really matter, that you might be moving on, or that the place that you're living isn't a priority to you? Or are there things like little subtle things that you can do, little ways God can use you in your neighborhood, and little small victories that the Spirit can work through you, where you can start to say, hey, I'm here. I'm not leaving. This place matters. I'm putting down roots, and I care about each and every one of you. How could that happen? In fact, I love a lot of people recently, a lot of preachers have emphasized this, but I love that Jeremiah 29, 4-7 has become kind of this there's been this rediscovery in recent years of it. A lot of Christians know Jeremiah 29:11, obviously, and kind of misquote that passage. But earlier in Jeremiah 29, the prophet Jeremiah is talking to all these Israelites who find themselves in exile. They're really far away from home in Babylon. It was very easy for them to say, this place doesn't matter. We're not going to put down roots. We're not going to act like it matters. We're not going to act like we care for these people or this place. And the prophet Jeremiah actually gives a completely different message to them, that when God begins to speak to them, how they can thrive in a place that they didn't necessarily think that they were signing up for. And I'm reading this from the Message, but he says, this is a message from God to the exiles who have been taken from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and make yourself at home. Put in gardens and eat what grows in that country. Marry and have children. Encourage your children to marry, to have children, so that you thrive in the country and not waste away. Make yourself at home there and work for the country's welfare. Pray for Babylon's well-being. If things go well for Babylon, things go well for you. Some of the translations say, seek the prosperity of the city, and as it thrives, so you're going to thrive. I love this idea. God's saying, no, commit to where you're at. I think you're going to be surprised how many barriers are going to come down in your own life and the people around. If you start to commit, if you show that this place matters, if you start seeking its prosperity, if you start kind of those social contract things, if you start showing that you care, I think you're going to see not only you're going to thrive, but they're going to thrive. God's going to bless that. God's going to use you in ways that you never imagined, even in a place you didn't think you think you were going to thrive. How can we show fidelity to the people that God has around us? How can we be faithful and be steadfast and continually make them a priority, doing the small things and the big things to make it clear that we want them to be a part of our lives? So hopefully you're going to do the big things. You are going to be hospitable. You're going to throw the parties. You're going to give the gifts. You're going to go take on the service projects. But maybe even just this week, it's a few small things you need to do to reorient your disposition, make it clear to people around you that they matter to you and that you're there for the long haul. So hopefully this is helpful. We got one more video in this series where we're going to be talking about the last two, gentleness and self-control. But hopefully this week, it's opened your eyes to how important faithfulness is. Thanks, friends.